Dahryn Trivedi is on a mission to bridge science, religion, and consciousness by scientifically validating the existence of God to vastly improve the human condition and to benefit humanity on a global scale. She shares scientifically proven and life-changing solutions for personal development, spiritual growth, better health, and a higher quality of life. In today's episode, Dahryn proves the existence of God through science, substantiating faith with facts. Welcome to Lifeology.
Thank you, James. Happy to be here.
Thank you as well. I was really excited when I received this pitch regarding this because the whole tagline of Lifeology is where you simplify and transform your spirit, mind, and body. And oftentimes people think those are very separate or very isolated. And so I'm really excited to have you be on my show to share how we can really connect our spirituality with the rest of us. And so I'm speaking a lot here, but I'm really excited as well about how you've proven this through science. And so we're going to go through all the different peer-reviewed scientific research projects as well. So with you being here today, how did you come on this journey? I mean, it's a huge question. How did you realize that there was God through science?
It's a good question. I mean, to be honest, all of this really started with my husband, and he's my husband and my guru, Guruji Trivedi. And I mean, my whole journey, like I had this deep connection with God to begin with from, early childhood, a lot of divine experiences, whatever you want to call it. But the point is, I don't want to go into my subjective story because I want people to approach things from an outcome and practical oriented approach to consciousness and divine. And, my journey, things really changed. Like this man, my husband, he was the catalyst of transformation in my life that ultimately, through my quest for higher consciousness, mastery over myself, control over my own happiness, my own connection to divine, the universe, my own, cognition, my own improvements in life, just general better quality of life, all really transformed when I met this man. Mm-hmm. And basically all of the science, all of this research, that is the foundation of our organization, our nonprofit Divine Connection International, is all founded because he is the founder and, the pioneer of all this research. Mm-hmm. And through my connection with him, I was able to transform my own consciousness to reach to a point where I can now do essentially what he does. And so that's our goal, is that everybody, right? Because everybody has consciousness, which means everybody's capable of being able to do what I have been able to do. Mm-hmm. And that's the message I'm here to share with everybody, that through consciousness, you can transform your life and you can use your life to transform the lives of others.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that, to really focus on the science-based aspect of it. A lot of times people feel like they can make this change. And so often, we see improvement in one's life. And so when you talk about the cognitions, in other words, our thoughts, when they focus on that, they do represent this. They do recognize there's change. And all of a sudden, doubt creeps in. All of a sudden, life happens. And all of a sudden, that change is all of a sudden reverted back to a sense of normalcy. In the different aspects of how you've learned to be more enlightened, how to be able to change things on the atomic level, how is it specifically that you have these situations and you're able to maintain the change so that one person can live it in a more enlightened, in a more enlightened way?
So a lot of times when we're seeing things that are temporary and transitory in nature, and they're not like something that's like a fundamental permanent change that has a lasting impact, we're treating things at the level of the brain and the body only. And what neuroscience says, if you actually go into neuroscience, neuroscience says that in order for our thoughts and our actions to be orderly and to maintain a specific order in our lives, we actually need to change the structure of the brain itself. It doesn't work the other way around. The other way is actually often temporary or very difficult, or the changes you make are just incremental. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes, because it's even an incremental change compared to whatever situation we're in is significant enough that it's like, wow, this is great. This is a huge improvement. But a lot of people don't know that, when you're able to change things at this essence of whatever we are, whatever the humans and nature and everything, that composition itself, then all those characters and behaviors change as a reflection. They change as a byproduct of altering that. And these are permanent structural changes in our very being that happens. And it's been scientifically proven.
Yes, I really like how you help us recognize that when we make this conscious choice, we're going from our mind aspect, which are our thoughts, and in that we make the change. But if, like you said, if it's not cellular, if there's no permanent change in our physique or physiology, then yes, we'll revert back to something. And what people don't realize is that we're allowing the environment to change us, as opposed to we changing our ability to change ourselves, and then that allows us to not allow the environment to connect us. And so it's either an external motivator or an internal motivator for that change as well.
Right, 100%.
hearing all this, I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask you, but first off, I want to tell you, and of course, my listeners and viewers as well, I respect you. I respect what you have to say today. So the questions I ask you, maybe a little direct, maybe kind of all over the place, but I want you to know that I'm only asking you these questions because I truly believe that you have the answers for that. So I want my viewers and listeners to know that I respect you, and I want you to feel as comfortable as possible because you are the person that's going to teach us today. People hearing me today, they're probably like, James, what is she talking about when it comes to changing yourself on a molecular level or atomic level? Can you give us an understanding of what that is? And then we'll transition to some things that they can actually work and try on their own.
So when I go into that, I'm going to have to kind of explain a little bit of what consciousness is, what we're talking about here. So if we're looking at consciousness, right, and we can identify this consciousness as God, we can identify this from a more scientific perspective and just call it like a universal intelligent consciousness, right? Essentially, Albert Einstein had this theory. It's called unified field theory, that everything is possibly connected by this one field of energy. And this field of energy, basically all these other energies are secondary energies that are controlled by this one energy that connects everything together. Right. And he was on the verge, he was looking for this type of energy throughout his entire course of his existence. And he was never able to find it. And, because nobody's really been able to harness it and apply it scientifically. It's never been able to have a scientific application or outcome till today, except for what we're doing now. And so when we're looking at consciousness, right, if we go into like the very beginning of existence, right, you have energy and you have matter. When you have energy and you have matter, basically what happened is they were already existing before the Big Bang, right? That this is a theory from Sir Arthur C. Clarke, a renowned physicist. It was kind of ahead of his time, but he theorized essentially energy and matter existed long before the Big Bang. And the Big Bang was actually not the birth of the universe, but the birth of consciousness in the universe and its integration with energy and matter. And what this consciousness is consciousness is the substance and the essence of all of life itself. It is the director controller. It is that very thing, which basically, what tells an atom what the atom's going to be? What tells an atom to form a chair, to form a person, to form a tree, right? There's a very specific set of information. We're not able to identify exactly what that was, but if you were supposedly able to change that information in the atom, you can change its characters and behaviors as a result of doing that. And so what we found is this energy that is programming the atom is that very consciousness from the beginning of the Big Bang. And that energy of consciousness directs, it tells the atom what to do and how to be and the conditions of its existence. So when we're looking at human nature, what we have to understand is that all of life, everything down from atoms to molecules to human emotions, human conditions, all of these things are directed and controlled by consciousness. So the only way that you can really make a change in your life, right, is to change things at the level of consciousness. Now, this is something that's fundamentally really hard to do on your own, especially because I don't know if you've ever tried to change a habit or tried to do something different in your life, right? An old programming that you've been living your life a certain way and you want to change it. It takes an incredible amount of effort, an incredible amount of energy to do that, right? That effort, that awareness, that conscious decision to make that comes from consciousness, right? But the resistance we feel and we face in our life basically is coming from a bigger consciousness, right, that exists outside of our own individual decision to make a change. And this consciousness is the consciousness of nature. Now, the consciousness of nature enforces certain sets of regulations, certain parameters by which things can exist and function within those parameters. If you exceed those parameters, certain things happen. You're no longer harmonious. You're no longer able, right, the homeostasis that you've maintained is lost. So your life is essentially lost, right? If your temperature, your body temperature goes above or below a certain parameter, you can die or go into a coma, right? There can be a lot of severe repercussions when you go outside of these bounds, right? So we're not meant to exceed or go outside of these bounds. Nature has tight regulation over that. So a lot of these things that are, prevalent in the wellness industry and, personal development, a lot of it is pseudoscience. And a lot of what you see, even on a clinical setting, a lot of it is psychological reports. So, right, you can easily say, I feel great the next day, 100% improvement, marked down. They don't measure a lot of other parameters that really show you the hardcore objective science behind that approach. And you would also assume that if there's anything that's actually existing in the wellness industry, then the number of problems and the size of the wellness industry wouldn't really be increasing so much. But you see, the wellness industry is bigger than the pharmaceutical industry. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, 4 times larger than the pharmaceutical industry. And at the same time, our mental health problems are on the rise. They're increasing even more, which shows that whatever's out there is not providing a lasting solution for people. So, right, as I was saying, this energy of consciousness, this is where I get to the clinical trial and what we're able to do. So what we've found is that by not applying any other methodology or trick or technique, by simply being able to harness consciousness and transmitting it to either a living organism, a non-living material, a human being, whatever that may be, you can essentially change, right, those operating conditions for that person that nature has tightly regulated. They can exceed beyond it and eventually reach a new state of consciousness where they're able to maintain these certain levels of conditions within their life. And that includes better relationships, better finances, overall better quality of life, better physical health, mental health. All these things we've seen reflected when you change consciousness, and they're lasting.
There's so many things you said there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to hear more about this. Many people have heard about the law of attraction. So law of attraction. So is this an element of that, as far as being able to? Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate the difference between that, because people say I'm going to attract this to myself, etc. And so in that, sometimes people think they can change themselves this way. So I'm glad to hear that there's a difference between the two of that. Can you share a little bit more about that so people understand more of what you're talking about, as opposed to lumping the two together?
So. Right, consciousness, its sole purpose is to organize, integrate, and evolve everything. Okay. That's the very reason, its very purpose, its very existence, which is why we have this fundamental innate yearning and desire to improve our lives, to do something different, to be better, right? There's this innate urge in every human being to seek for something that ultimately encompasses a state of freedom. And what they don't realize is this state of freedom, most importantly, more than anything, applies to our minds. Right? This mental state of freedom. We're often enslaved by our own thoughts. And you see all the disorders and problems that are prevalent today come from a disordered state of mind. Right? And you see even the physical ailments that exist today. Right? We've created, a lot of drugs and things that help, with environmental problems. But when we come to our own physical problems, the ones that are most prevalent today are all inflammatory based. A lot of these problems today are all based on this huge amount of inflammation. The greatest cause of inflammation is the mind, is stress. Stress doesn't come from outside, it comes from within the mind. And a lot of people don't realize that stress, right, comes from essentially just having a lot of thoughts. It's not necessarily even having good thoughts or bad thoughts, because you can have something called positive delusion. Right? And positive delusion is another way that nature likes to keep you under control, because nature prevents you from growing.
Yes.
You're essentially no longer progressing and growing when you have positive delusions. You're no longer reflecting, you're no longer embodying the characters that consciousness uses to basically implement change into your life, to integrate and evolve your being. Mm-hmm. And so the whole point of this, right? There is a character that exists within nature, and this is called purity, right? Purity and innocence. And you see this prevalent in all of religions. Everybody talks about it in all religions and spirituality, this concept of purity and this concept of innocence, right? And it's coming from a level of vulnerability and sincerity with life itself, with who we are and with life, and with this ultimate authority that we have to acknowledge, that we have to understand has this huge control over us beyond our own minds. We often think that within our own minds, whatever we can do, we're the ones doing it and we're the ones most capable. And if you actually look even scientifically, what we've proven with over 6,000 science experiments, 660 peer-reviewed science publications, right? This is in life sciences, plants, animals, bacteria, viruses, fungi, seeds. We're talking non-living materials, right? Like metals, ceramics, polymers, chemicals. Non-living materials and living materials, they don't have a belief system. They don't have faith. They don't have their own minds, essentially, where that dictates, whether they're able to control their realities and change it once they change their minds. But this energy of consciousness can still change those things at the atomic and molecular and cellular levels, at the DNA level, at the genetic level. So without a mind, without this concept of self-reflection, and if I can change my mind, I can change my reality through the law of attraction, these things are still able to attract better conditions of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
The law of attraction doesn't apply to plants and metals and ceramics and polymers.
Yeah, that's very true. Well spoken. Yeah, it's very true. Going back to the whole aspect of people being able to control their consciousness and manage that. What are some ways in which your techniques, the divine blessings, I believe. What is it that? How can you teach us at least one thing? I'm stumbling over my words here because I have so many things I want to ask you, and I have such a limited time. So, what would be one or two things that you can tell people to be able to have them practice this, to be the awareness of that, and then of course I want them to connect with you and learn more about it.
So fundamentally, it's not a practice or a technique. We're actually very much, I want to say that as long as it works for you, do it, obviously. But a lot of people aren't really aware of what's working or not, because they go through this excitement period when they follow a new practice or follow a new, approach a new kind of protocol. And there's like a honeymoon phase, and they feel a lot of excitement, and they think that excitement is change. Right. And then after a while, they start to get bored with it, or, their problem, maybe their problem transforms into another appearance, and they think that, okay, that problem's solved, but then there's a different problem somewhere else. Right. So what we've seen that's very prevalent, and you see even a lot of religious teachers, or a lot of, gurus that exist in the world, many people from different sects, religions, methodologies, all talk about different practices, dogmatic approaches to transforming your life. We're against that. We're against dogma and ritual and practice. What really needs to happen is a fundamental change in consciousness. And this is not done through practice or technique, as I've established with neuroscience and in the fundamental laws of nature, all those things. It doesn't happen that way. What really happens, there's this concept in nature called conductivity. And this level of conductivity, right? Basically, all these different materials, right, have different aspects of conductivity, right? And this applies even to non-living materials, right? Where you have certain materials that are better conduits of different types of energy, right? You have, like rubber versus metal are better or worse conduits for electrical energy, right? And then, we go into this unified field theory where there's this energy that connects all things. So there's something about all things that there should be some conductivity or some aspect of conductivity where everything's able to channel this energy based upon a change in their character, right? And so what is this conductivity that we're seeing? So what we've seen with humans, because consciousness works different in humans, though consciousness is the one universal principle that applies to all things. Well, when we talk about enlightened consciousness, which is ultimately the consciousness that is required, because it's a consciousness that exceeds the consciousness of nature, which is how a human is able to harness this pure consciousness, this pure, limitless, universal consciousness, to be able to apply it and harness it to other life forms, change people's lives, transform life itself. Right? That's required, a certain level of consciousness. In this case, it exceeds the consciousness of nature. So in order to reach that state, or even just to raise consciousness, you need this conductivity of consciousness. And this conductivity, and this has been the answer of religion, right? That science is missing, right? And this answer that comes from religion is this concept of purity. Now, if you go and look at an iron bar, for example, if you look at the atomic and molecular structure of an iron bar, you see all the atoms and molecules. They're all arranged very chaotically within the iron bar. And if we look at the iron bar transformed into a magnetic bar, where it's able to channel and harness magnetic energy, we see a difference in the atomic and molecular structure within that bar. The difference we see is something called alignment, where we see that these structures, these atoms and molecules, are aligned in perfect synchronicity with, now it's not an alignment with itself. That's the confusing part that a lot of people misunderstand. We will try and align with our own minds and our own consciousness to get what we want. We can't do that. You have to align with the fundamental nature of existence that powers your reality, and that is consciousness. So these atoms and these molecules are not aligned with the iron bar itself. They're aligned with the magnetic energy that powers the iron bar. So in being in that perfect alignment, they're not creating generating magnetic energy. Science has it wrong, and this is where science really needs to unite and collaborate with religion and spirituality, because science assumes that it's the mind that generates and controls consciousness. And what we've seen with our science is we've proven that it's not the mind that generates consciousness, but rather consciousness that generates the mind and controls life.
Interesting.
So this alignment, right, is harnessing this magnetic energy that already exists in nature. It's already there. It's not creating magnetic energy, it's harnessing magnetic energy. And in doing so, it's acting as a conduit. And if you get other iron bars or other magnetic particles, it can actually magnetize other particles as well through its mere presence. It's not following a trick or a technique or a practice, it's simply being. It's simply being whatever it needs to be to harness that magnetic energy. So in the same thing, when we're talking about humans consciousness obviously is very different. There are certain things that apply to humans that don't apply to metals and ceramics, polymers, that don't even apply to trees and animals per se. And these are these characters of essentially purity, of pure, you could say, compassion, selflessness, love, loyalty, all these different aspects. But all of these things are just emanations that come from a pure place of mind. And what this pure place of mind is a place of stillness, is a place of not generating more thoughts and trying to change your reality by changing your thoughts, but rather the quiescence of thought itself is a place of stillness. And from that stillness, these characters you see, and we've seen this even in our clinical trial, which I would like to cover real quick as well, is that this stillness, right? These characters come out from that stillness. They naturally generate themselves. You don't need to be loving, right? You can't control love. You can't force yourself to be loving. There's no trick practice that can make you more loving. But we've seen that when you are more loving, obviously there's a certain power to that of consciousness that works behind that love. So when we're talking about things in terms of purity of the mind, it's from this purity of the mind, purity and consciousness, that this love comes forth from. So it's the consciousness that powers the love. It's consciousness that powers any practice. It's consciousness that makes meditation effective, not meditation itself.
Yes. Yeah, I follow that. I'm sure many people followed it as well. And we'll have to listen to this multiple times in order to capture everything you said. You speak so well, by the way. And let's transition into the clinical trials, because we only have, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to be able to do that. I know we're going over a little bit, but I'm going to cut the full episode for you. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to quickly say, one of the greatest things that I'm excited about of our science research is our most recent clinical trial. The clinical trial that I did, I was basically sitting in the location of Florida, and all the participants were, located in India. So this is a remote transmission, right? You call energy healing, raising consciousness, whatever you want to do it. But ultimately, as a catalyst, right, enlightened consciousness can work to help raise the consciousness of other things. And in doing so, by raising that consciousness, the characters and behaviors change as a result. So that's why we have membership programs at divineconnection.org, is because we understand that there ultimately needs to be a catalyst. There needs to be someone who can help raise your consciousness, unless you have that level of purity already to be able to do that on your own. If you don't have that, sometimes people need help, especially when there's so much resistance and so many factors against us in life. Sometimes it works better to have someone who can act as a conduit and give you this supply of energy yourself, so these changes can happen automatically in your life. And then eventually you can become independent. Our point is an independent model of happiness, where you become independent. You no longer depend on anything in your life. That's a sign of higher consciousness. When you depend on others and you have all these problems in your life, that's just a state of lower consciousness. So we basically had a group of 120 participants. We've had several clinical trials, but our most recent one, we had a group of 120 volunteers, all of them with psychosomatic mental health problems, financial problems, relationship problems, all across the board. And so these people range from the age of 20 to 55, 50% men, 50% women. And what we did is, all we did was, and this is a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled clinical trial. So we had, someone who pretended to do the energy healing, me who actually did it, and then we had, a control group as well. And what we did is, all we did by raising their consciousness, we were able to see changes in their neurotransmitters. We were able to see changes in their vitamin absorption and their nutrition absorption, not just improvement in psychological parameters, but actual parameters that the body, over 130 blood parameters, right? Your hormone production, all these things improved. And, incomparable to the sham group, because we know there's some power of placebo in our lives, but it's very limited and, small. And we've seen, millionfold larger improvement by comparison to even the placebo control. That shows you there's something actually happening there. Now, the most significant part is we did something called the NIH Toolbox for Cognitive and Motor Function. Just to give you an idea, the NIH Toolbox for Cognitive and Motor Function, most of the time when we're validating a new therapy or a new drug that's about to go on the market, this toolbox is used primarily to assess whether there is any negative or adverse effects to the treatment or the drug, because nobody has ever seen it actually improve with a treatment. They've only been able to measure whether it has an adverse effect on cognition and motor function.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Our study is the first of its kind to ever show more than 100% improvement in cognitive and motor function. It's the first. And on top of that, I'm talking cognitive function in the NIH Toolbox. We're talking language, working memory, episodic memory, executive function, in the motor function, locomotion, standing balance, dexterity, grip strength, and endurance. Right. So we found nearly 100% improvement in all of these parameters just by raising consciousness, not by doing anything else. They didn't change their lives. They didn't do anything else that they needed to do. And we found significant improvement in all of these parameters. It's the first study of its kind. So I'm very excited to share that on your podcast.
Yes. Yeah. I'm very excited to learn more about this as well. Like I said, there's so many things I want to ask you, and unfortunately our time is up. I know people have, I've a little gobsmacked here as I'm trying to formulate my words. So when people watch this or listen to this, I want to direct them to you. So, I'm sure they want to read the clinical research, all the different publications you've been in. I mean, there's been been reviewed by MIT, by Harvard, by Stanford, I believe. All those things have been substantiated. So I really want people to hear this, that even though she's talking about the clinical findings, there's so many worldly or more different academia who've also substantiated your findings as well. So if my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you and to work with you all to learn all the information that you and your husband are continuing to provide for us, where do they find all this information online?
So first of all, I've shared my message, on various different television networks like the CW, Fox News, NBC, ABC. I've also shared, my message at Business World Festival of Wellbeing. All of our publications, you can see we have over 660 publications, 6,000, science experiments. You can find all of them, Google Scholar. They're also indexed. They're available at, like you were saying, Harvard, MIT, Stanford. They're available in over 2,000, universities all over the globe in over 130 countries, as well as the National Institutes of Health. You can find our publications there, and even the U.S. government. But if you want just a quick access to everything without having to go and look for all these things, you can just visit our website, www.divineconnection, divineconnection.org. And you can learn more about us, what we do, even the programs, the memberships we have to offer to apply it to human life and change your life.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My viewers and listeners also know that if you can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmiller@lifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Dahryn Trivedi and all of her information there as well. So thank you so much, Dahryn. I appreciate your time and energy. Thank you so much for teaching us today.
Thank you, James. Wonderful to be here.